All right. Hello. Last one of the semester. Yeah. So I'm the reporter for the Knieper experiment. I'm not going to pretend like I know how to say that word, but let's get started. So essentially, what we're doing is the main objective is just to get the latent heat vaporization of water using the data we measured in the lab. Essentially, we can use this data to compare it against the steam tables just to see how well of an experiment we ran. A lot of the steam tables that actually were built on used these types of experiments to gather their data. So we did this experiment specifically using the boiling beans method. All right, so the general procedure is pretty simple. You activate a vacuum pump, wait for the pressure to stabilize, turn the hot plate on, begins boiling, and begin logging the data, close the vacuum pump, and you can get started. However, the system no longer worked when we did it, and we also didn't have a water reservoir, so we ended up using previous data, which I'll get to in a bit. Generally, we had three main procedures to go about this data to see the data points and compare. And the first was a procedure where we used this equation and to solve for the latent heat vaporization, which is AHFG. And essentially, we took derivatives of certain values at certain locations at certain time or at certain temperature values, and then we just plugged it into the equation. The second one, we utilized Excel for curve fitting. I used a basic piecewise function by pretty much setting huge differences in the temperature. And then procedure three, there's a linear approximation method, which was the most accurate one. This is our data compared to the time-delay data. As you can see, it does not actually make much sense. And so I decided to not, in fact, use this data. This is why I am not going to be using or presenting on our data. We're presenting on older data because this is what the expected graph would be, and this is what we ended up with. All right, so yeah, that's just me repeating it, essentially. When we're trying to run the experiment, the vacuum just wasn't really working with us, but we can still kind of apply the same procedures and kind of get the same general thermodynamic knowledge from all of it. All right, this is the old data, and this is the pressure versus temperature graph. Obviously looks way nicer and more similar to this. However, you are kind of still seeing little jumps, little discontinuities, but overall, this is kind of the data that I am working with. So, using procedure one, I got really whack results, and this is because it's pretty expected. I'm literally taking random derivatives at small increments randomly along this, and then solving for HVG at those increments. This is the tabulated data, so this is what we would expect. And we sort of got some of the same linearization, just huge outliers, and there were also some negatives, I'm just not including them, but they were pretty sparse. So big outliers, but we did get some sort of general trend that did kind of match. Next was procedure two. This is when I used the piecewise function, and essentially I believe that the reason that this turned out looking different is because when we were doing the procedure, you saw that there was these weird jumps and these weird discontinuities, and so that just happened to line up for that for the derivatives, and so it kind of created that type of look. And so even though this ended up being a third of the section that was messed up, but that is the reason why the first two kind of follow more along this trend, and that one does not. But the data is starting to look more accurate. You don't have crazy outliers anymore. You're getting general averages for the derivatives, and so you do see an improvement from procedure one. Last was procedure three, and this was kind of a pain in the butt to figure out how to do. Maybe it's because I was trying to do it just raw, but essentially you had to use Excel's tool pack. You had to get an A value, B value, and then you had to do some others. It was annoying, but I got it, and this is what I ended up getting. My A value was around 20.8, and my B value was negative 4020. Essentially, the tool pack just created a function directly relating HVG to temperature. I think it was 20.8 times the temperature values in Kelvin, and then this is the y-intercept, just to give the general perspective. And it looked really similar to the data. I was very happy with procedure three. Alright, overall, the experimental data was obviously not effective, that's why I did not use it, but the previous good data was very effective, and you can use it to intuitively figure out how we found latent heat vaporization in the tables, and just overall understand it. Using the different ways to calculate latent heat vaporization showed that there are multiple ways to go about the problem or process. I do recommend, even though the third procedure was more annoying, it was the most effective one at generating good correlation. But at the end of the day, it was like, if you're just looking for something just to get the general scope of things, you can use procedure 1 and 2 and probably be fine. But overall, that's it. Have a good, yeah. Have a good one, guys. That was a great year.